Check. From the tippy to the rippy. Third class. Go, 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 yeah, go. I know it's not time for those. Yeah, go, yeah. Yo, Overflow, what the deal, bro? I heard you need a lyricist to kick an ill flow, hard like a steel toe. With the real, the same they got them artists killed, cause they kept it 100 like a Franklin dollar bill, yo. Well, breaking news, couldn't get this live. I think I might chip a two.
Hey everyone, my name is George Originalis, aka Vapor, and you are listening to Radio Faith, Episode 7. The song you're listening to right now is called Era by our guest, DJ Overflow. He is a Houston-based DJ, and this conversation is actually the very first conversation I have ever had with him. I've been following him on social media for a while now, and I was just thinking, man, I need to get him on the show. So here is that conversation with DJ Overflow. So today's show we have DJ Overflow. He is a Houston-based DJ and producer. How you doing today, sir?
Good. How are you, man? I'm doing great, man. I'm actually on like 3 and a half hours of sleep, man. But I'm good. I'm okay.
Man, yeah, I saw on your Facebook that you're on the road right now doing some gigs, right?
Yeah. So last night we were in Fort Worth, DJing DJ for some military officials out in Fort Worth. And then got home last night from the event about 3:30, and then I had to get up this morning and DJ. I DJ for a gym every Saturday morning for about 3 hours. So I had to be up about 5:30 in the morning, and then do that. Come home. I slept for about another hour, and then came down to DJ for Chick-fil-A for their bullpen for the Astros Bayou event that they had, the street festival that they had today. That's
awesome, man. Staying busy.
Yeah, man. It's great, man. I love it, man. I love doing what I do, man. It's been a lifelong dream to be able to do what I do, man. And grateful that God has allowed me to be able to do this full time. I believe I'm going in on my 6th year doing the DJ and just ministry and in motivational speaking. For about 6 years, and just providing for my home through it.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. So you said you've been doing this 6 years. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself as far as your testimony, and then go into how you got into doing producing and DJ?
Sure, man. So I'm a PK, man. And for some of y'all who are listening, the term PK is a term used inside the church for a pastor's kid. So I grew up in the church walls, but we didn't have what we have today, all the cool music and the cool concerts and events back then growing up. It was a little bit different. And so I grew up in a home where my dad was, we would consistently, Wednesday night prayer service, Friday night service, Saturday night vigils, and Sunday morning service, second Sunday night service. So I grew up pretty much doing church almost all my life. And so, growing up and almost being forced, as a pastor's kid, there's so much demand from the people in church. Like they expect for you to live a certain way, or they look at you at a higher, they put on this higher thing over you, that's really unrealistic, cause they don't do that to their children, but they're willing to do that to the pastor's kids' children. And so you feel a lot of the pressures of that. Everyone's watching, everyone's looking. So I grew up in that church, in that kind of setting. And so it's a lot, especially for a young elementary kid and a middle school and high school kid. It's a lot of pressure going on because everyone's watching your every move. And so for me, I never truly had an experience of who Jesus was, from growing up. I didn't know. I didn't have a personal experience. I've only heard the experiences that my father had and my mother had, and just the elders in the church and, the women in the church and, different people. And it was great, but it was one of those things for me was like, I don't know if this is real. I don't know if this idea of God is like, I felt like this is what old people do when they have nothing else to do, when they've already did their life. This is like, okay, this is what they do. Almost like a social club type thing, And this is in my own mindset. I never told this to anybody in my mind. This is what I'm thinking growing up. And so, it was really, really hard for me growing up, because my dad was very strict. You know, he's a very, very strict guy. And so, you know, I went through a lot of pain, and I went through a lot of hurt, and I went through a lot of things with my dad. And so it really messed me up, my view of God and Jesus and the idea of God, because here's a man that would literally, when it would go out to, you know, save the world, he would go out to preach the gospel, would go out and be on a pulpit and talk about love and grace, you know, the mercy of God and all this. But yet I never got grace. But yet I never got mercy. But yet, you know, I never saw the love that I felt that I needed, right, from him. And so the idea of God and the representation of a father was like far-fetched for me, was because he was the only representative of what a father, true father, looks like here on earth that represents God. And so I'm looking at this man and like, man, this is not what I want, you know, like this is not what I want to be a part of. And so I literally rebelled, man. I didn't have, like I said, a great relationship. My dad was really never home, didn't really get the affirmation that I felt that I needed. And mind you, the father that I grew up with, he's a stepfather. You know, my father left me when I was about 2, 3 years old, you know, so I never, to this day, I have yet to meet him. And so, you know, I think it was difficult for him, too, to love me and to possibly love my older brother, because it wasn't, you know, we weren't his blood children, but he still loved us. Don't get me wrong. Man had to do as far as always being there and, you know, being a true provider. But I think the affirmation part just wasn't there. The affection just wasn't there. And so I looked elsewhere else for that, you know? And so growing up with that, when you're about 14 years old, you know, for me at 14 years old, I ended up falling in love with breakdancing, you know? So breakdancing was like the thing for me. I was like, yo, this is crazy. I see people flipping on their heads and, you know, they're sitting there breakdancing. And it really attracted me. The music was incredible as well. And so I started breakdancing, and I found like family through breakdancing. I found family. I found friends who, you know, who would tell me, man, you're great, you're good. Like, dude, that was crazy how you did that, you know. So I found the affection and the love in through my friends and not through the structure of a home, right? So I was always, from 14 years old all the way up until about 17, I literally would go to school and come back home, put my stuff up, and then I would go out and practice. And I would practice for 8 hours on a day. I was never truly home. And the reason why I was never truly home is because of just growing up and not getting the affection. Man, I had more affection outside of my home, you know what I'm saying, than in my home. So I would rather be with my friends. And so I got into a really bad relationship. We broke up, and that really affected me. You know, it brought in depression in my life. And one of the dancers at the time that I knew, I didn't know this. I knew him for years, but I didn't know that he was a drug dealer. So he ended up inviting us to a party, and we went to this party. It was probably it was a rave party, actually, one of the biggest rave parties here in Houston, Texas. You know, it was like back in '99, I believe. It was done like at the Astro Arena or Astrodome. I think it was Astrodome, and it was one of the biggest ones. It came on the news and everything. And so, because I was hurt and I was looking for love and I was looking for that, you know, that peace, I go to this place and I'm just like, wow, this is dope. Yeah, lights and music and DJs, and all my friends were there. And so this friend of mine decides, you know what, hey, here's this pill, you know, take it, try it, and just thank me later, you know. So he gave me this pill, I drank it, and it was ecstasy. So I tried this ecstasy, and it was just like, wow, you know, it was, at the time, it was like, man, it made me feel incredible. I forgot about all my hurt and my pain and all the things that I was going through that relationship and everything else that I had went through at home with my parents. And so from that point on, that was the starting point of my drug addiction. And so it was like around 16, 17, 18, 19, all the way through about 20 years old. So here I am, a drug addict. And I remember at one point I told my dad, you know, I was like, man, this idea of God, and you're forcing me to go to church. Like, every time you force me to go to church and every time you force me to have an experience with God, I hate God even more. And this is, you know, me telling my father, a pastor, you know, how I felt about the idea of God, because I didn't have the proper representation. And so, you know, any fathers that are listening, I want to inspire you, man. If you're a leader in your church or just a leader anywhere, you own a business, make sure you spend time with your children. Make sure you spend time with them and tell them that you love them.
Amen.
Tell them that they're great. Tell them that they're amazing. You know, tell them that they can do anything that they dream about doing, you know?
Yeah.
And
Amen.
so I didn't, you know, like I said, I didn't get those things, right? And so here I am, drug addict at 20 years old. I go through a drug overdose. And, you know, I'm literally experiencing out-of-body experience and, you know, had an experience of going to hell and coming back. Christ meets me in hell. Jesus meets me in hell, gives me a second chance of life. And that is when I genuinely experienced the power of God. You know, I genuinely experienced who Jesus really was. It wasn't through a sermon. It wasn't through a preaching. It wasn't through an outreach. It wasn't through a church service. It was literally in my deathbed, in an essence. You know what I'm saying? And going to hell, God meets me there and says, man, let me give you a second chance. I wake up from that apartment that I was in 8 hours later, and I literally survived a drug overdose. And the percentage of a survival of a drug overdose is about 98% of the people who go through drug overdose, do not survive. It's almost unheard of. And so here I am, I survived a drug overdose, and I knew, right off then, I knew God was real. I knew that the Holy Spirit was real, because 8 hours later I woke up and God was like, if you continue to live this lifestyle, you continue to live this life, you're going to die. But if you choose me and you choose to follow me, you have life. And I knew exactly what he meant. And so at 20 years old, here I am, you know, in a quest to know who God is, in a quest to personally know who God is, you know, not through my father's experience or my mother's experience or the elders' experience, but no, this was a genuine experience. And so I started attending my dad's church, you know, again, and started going through the discipleship classes. I started, you know, being poured into and discipled, and then I go through leadership courses and then ministry courses. And so I would say about, you know, between 20 and 22 years old, I formed a rap group within my church. I was the first one, or in a Latin church is unheard of, right? At the time, I was the first rap artist and with a rap group. And, you know, back then, you know, people say, eso del diablo, that's of the devil. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean.
That's from the devil. That's not from God. And so we had 50% of the leadership that was for it. And then the other 50% was like, yo, this is not of God. This is from the devil. And so, the youth pastor at the time, and, you know, he's an amazing youth pastor at the time. He's like, man, let's use it. Let's use the arts. Let's use the culture. Let's attract the youth to come to the Lord. And so God started using me through the arts, through rapping and dancing. And so because I had a rap group, I started producing music. I started producing beats. And so I bought 2 turntables. I bought vinyl turntables, and I started producing at home. So I have these 2 turntables at home, and I just start messing with them at home. And I, you know, not thinking like, hey, I want to be a DJ or I want to do this. But here I am, DJing at home. So I DJ for about a year or so, and then we had a special event going on. I believe it's 2000. I would say 2005, 2006, something I can't really remember. But we brought down Andy Mineo. He was known as C-Light at the time. It was the first time that C-Light had ever been in Houston, Texas. And our church at the time, the church I attended at the time, which is my dad's church, you know, we hired him to come for our hip hop night on Friday night. And this was when God Belongs in Our City was very big. And, you know, C-Light had a major song through the God Belongs in My City. So we brought him down, and I was like, man, if we're going to have a hip hop night, man, let me just bring the turntables and let's just really set it off, you know, let's really create a dope ambience, and let's use the visual part of the fact that we have a turntable on there. So we did. And so at the time we had C-Light, we had a artist named J-Flow at the time, and then the rap group that I was in. And so we did our thing. J-Flow came and did his thing, and then C-Light came in and just killed it, shut the whole place down. And so we get done with the event, and 2 days after the event, the artist by the name of J-Flow calls me and says, hey man, I'm looking for a DJ. Man, I got a tour that I'm, you know, touring some churches in the city of Houston. I need a DJ. I'm like, man, I'm not a DJ. I told him, man, I said, I just used my turntable skills that I learned at home just to serve my church and serve my you know, the youth at the time. And so he's like, man, that's perfect. He goes, that's what I need. I need a servant heart. I need someone with a servant heart.
Awesome.
To be able to do this. And so here I am, like, call my wife, like, hey, this idea. By that time, I'm married, by the way. By that time, I'm married. I've been married for 10 years to my beautiful wife, Lily, and, I have a 9-year-old son. So by that time, I was already married. So I, have to call the wife, got to make sure it's okay with the wife to pursue this idea of DJing, and I'm like, hey, I got an opportunity to DJ. And at the time, I was working at 8 to 5 and, really just trying to find my place in the church and try to find my purpose in life. And so, I did the dancing part. I did the rapping stuff. And then here I am, God's like, and I'll tell you this, my heart was never to DJ. Like, I never had that in mind. Man, I truly wanted to be a rap artist. Like, I truly wanted to use rap and, use it to connect with people and disciple people. And so we ended up, I ended up talking to my wife, and my wife's like, yes, you should try it out. Maybe this is something it'll go that route. So, I go DJ with J-Flow, and the rest was history, man. Like, other artists that I met during that tour got my number, and then people started calling. And by that time, when that happened, the company that I worked for about 6-7 years went bankrupt. So they went bankrupt, and I went to the competitor, and that didn't last for about maybe a month or two. And then I worked for a graphics company, but the graphics company couldn't even afford me to keep me on. But all the while, these DJ events were popping, they started being booked, and I'm just like, okay, Lord, what are you doing? Like, what is it that you're doing? And so, I started to pursue it, and so I decided one day, man, let me just do this full time and see where it goes. And, it was a scary thing to go full time because, you have a wife, you have a child, and, you got to pay the bills, and you got to eat, you got to provide. And so it was real, real scary, man. But that's how it happened. It was just me serving my local church, and finding my purpose and saying, God, just lead me wherever it is that you want me to go. And I believe to this day that the reason why I didn't become a successful rapper was because I think my heart was into it too much. And God was like, no, I want to be first. I want to be king over your heart. And I think I idolized rap, too much. And he knew that I wouldn't idolize DJing.
That's awesome, man. That's intense. Just from the beginning, you said, you grew up in a Christian home, and you had that Christian influence around you, but you weren't getting it from the main person, your father. And
right.
I just love how you spoke to all those fathers listening or leaders, that it's so important that we are not just ministering to the church or to the group that we're in charge of, but that we're ministering first to our family, that we're not supposed to sacrifice our family for the church. But,
correct. Just the family is the first structure, institution that God made here on earth. And, God says, seek ye the kingdom of God first and his righteousness, and everything else shall be added unto you.
Amen.
And so when you are seeking to love your wife, and you are seeking to provide for your family, and you're seeking to be there for your children, and if you're a pastor or leader and you want to grow in your leadership at church, and you want to expand your church, start at home.
Yes.
Tell your wife that you love her. Spend time with her. Tell your son or your children, your daughters, that they're great, that they're amazing. Let them know it. Everything starts at home. And I think a lot of pastors and a lot of leaders get caught up in wanting to save the whole world, but they can't seem to save their own family. And so, and I say that I'm proud of my father. I know I said this about I'm proud of my father. My father's come a long way. I'm the first generation to grow up here in the United States. So I'm proud because he's got, 3 churches, one in Stafford, one in Katy, one in Houston. He's got over 3,000 members, and he's doing an amazing job in the city of Houston, but through the situations that I went through, he learned to love my little brother and my little sister the way that I felt that I should have been loved, right? And because he changed that, God honored him, and because he started to move and do the right things, God started expanding his territory.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it takes us going through the valley for us to really wake up and see what God has really planned out for us. I love how you said too that with you personally that you were just starting out DJing for your youth group. You know, it was something you wanted to do as a hobby, but it just reminds me of in Luke where it says that whoever can be trusted with a little and is faithful to that, then God will bless you with more. And how you even, like, when this guy, what did you say, J-Flow? Came in.
Yeah, J-Flow, yes.
He says, hey, I need a DJ. And you're like, man, well, I'm not really a DJ. But like some other people were already seeing that in you before you saw it yourself. And then you just stepped forward and, you know, it took off from there. That's awesome. So how did you get the name DJ Overflow? I'm always interested in finding those stories out.
The name DJ Overflow arises from 2 Corinthians 1:34, and it says, for just as the suffering of Christ flows into our lives, so also through Christ our comfort overflows. And so I identify with that verse because I have suffered. Without Christ, I suffered. With Christ, I've suffered. But through Christ, I've received my comfort. You know, like through my suffering, I've received my peace, and he's always overflowed, you know, with his peace and his grace, his love, his understanding, his wisdom. And so I identify with that verse, and I said, you know what, I'm going to forever hold that verse. And I remember for years I would hold on to that word, and I would literally like pray that over my life, pray that over my family, and really live that out. Like, man, you know what? It doesn't matter what kind of sacrifice it takes for me to honor God through the arts, you know, I'm going to do it, even if it means that I'm going to suffer. But I know that through it, somehow, some way, God's going to comfort me and he's going to get all the glory. So that's how Overflow started. And so Overflow was my rap name. But when the DJ started happening, I didn't want to change names, you know, because I really identify with that name. And so I just put DJ in front of it, and it was DJ Overflow.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love how the name that you selected is a testimony in itself. That when someone asks you, that's just right there. If they're not a Christian or they are a Christian, you can just speak into their life just by explaining the background to your name, and how it ties so much to a topic that Christians, I think, in general, tend to shy away from: suffering for Christ. That we will be comfortable at times, but look at the Bible. There's a lot of suffering for those who walk faithfully in the Lord, and just relying, like you said, on his comfort and his peace to overflow in your life. So on the topic of suffering, what are some challenges you faced in your ministry in the past 6 years being a DJ?
I mean, to be quite honest with you, man, you know, at the end of the day, when you're new in the faith and you're growing, you're learning to trust God and you learn to obey God, you know, you're not going to always get it right. And so sometimes financially, I didn't have the means to provide for my home, you know, and I'll be quite open and honest, man. I lived with my in-laws for almost 7 years, you know, and pursuing the idea of ministry. And these were some things that I had to put my family back, right? I set my family back so that I could pursue this dream of being a DJ and using the arts to honor God. And so I think, you know, ideally my family wasn't really up for it. You know, they kind of frowned upon it. And I think anybody would. And I understand why, right? But you know, I knew what God was doing. And I knew, I said, God, I'm willing to set back. I'm willing to suffer. I'm willing to do whatever it takes for me to be able to honor you through this. And they're all honesty, man, through that suffering, though, you gain wisdom. Through that suffering, you gain understanding. Through that suffering, you gain self-control. Through that suffering, you gain how to be a better steward with your time, a better steward with your finances. And so I think for me, it's like when you say, God, you know, I'm willing to suffer, it's not necessarily like you're suffering. It's just you're going to go through some pain. You're going to go through some uncomfortness so that you could launch yourself in a better place a year from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, whatever it looks like for you and God and wherever he's trying to take you.
Yes. Yeah, I totally relate to that. I mean, there was a time when my wife and I and our oldest son, we were living with my in-laws too. At the time I was starting my own business, and it put us in a similar situation that you explained. And right now we find ourselves in another season like that, where, you know, money's not as it was a few years ago because of certain shifts we're making in pursuits and career changes and things. But like you said, God puts that thing in your heart, and you know it's from him, and you're stepping forward in faith, enduring a little bit of small-term sacrifice. How they say, small-term sacrifice for long-term gain, knowing that God has something in store for you. Like the valley is going to be just a moment, and then you're going to be climbing up the mountain pretty soon. That's pretty good. That's awesome right there. So go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify for those who are listening, man, you know, it's very easy to stamp Jesus and God and calling and you want to pursue your ministry, your calling, right? And I tell this to a lot of people that I meet, because I meet a lot of artists, rappers, musicians, and DJs, and they're starting out and they want to get this formula, like, man, how did you, what do you do, bro? Like, how is it that you're doing, or what is it? And I tell people, like, man, like, love your wife, be there for your son. And I say that because I made that mistake. Don't think I got it. I had it right from the beginning. Those were some of the sufferings. The guy was like, nah, I'm going to let you suffer and go through situations with your wife and situations with your son, because you're going to have to learn to get this right, because I can't give you more. Like what you said earlier, if you can't be faithful with the little, if you can't be faithful at home, he's not going to give you more outside of that.
Amen. Amen. So you're a DJ, you've been doing some production work for a while now, but you have one of your most recent releases is Kaleido Waves.
You know what? Yeah, so Kaleido Waves was actually released in, I think that was released about 2 or 3 years ago, but it was re-released on Spotify recently.
Okay, gotcha. So you have it's a re-release. Is it remastered or remixed, or is it just
It was just re-released. At the time, I didn't have the platform or the resource to get it on Spotify or on iTunes, and it was just like a learning experience. And so once I gained the wisdom and knowledge where I'm at today now, I said, you know what, I want to release this and make it accessible to everybody, and not just, because it was originally through Noise Trade only, available only on Noise Trade.
Okay.
And Noise Trade /DJ Overflow. And so now that I have access and, to put that up on Spotify, I said, you know what, I want to give it access so everybody can listen to it.
Yeah, man, it's a hot album. I was listening to it before we were getting ready for this interview, and it's a really, really good album. I know you have some singles you've been releasing. You got Down, Memoir, and Play Sing. That's a remix, correct? Or is it Pray and
Which
Disco?
one?
Play Sing?
Which one?
I'm thinking about Pray and
that's
Disco.
a remix. Yeah, that's a remix of Harold Melvin, a song, a disco song.
Yeah, man, it's good. So I love how you said that you started out wanting to be a rapper, and then God moved you towards being a DJ and used that to be a producer. And now you're actually working with rappers. What's that dynamic been like?
I think now in this place at this time that I'm at, man, I think I look for working with artists. I look for synergy. Does it feel right? Does it feel good? But not only just that, I think are the artists teachable is the other part too that I look at. The artists that I talk to, are you teachable? Meaning, I look at the fact that, and I try to teach everything that I've learned, all my failures, and all my experiences. I try to teach that to all the young artists that want to do ministry through the arts, and I want to help them not go through what I went through, right? And so, a lot of time, what I look for is he teachable. Does he love his wife? If he's married, does he love his wife? If he's not married, is he planning on going to college? Like, I look at all those things because it tells me a lot about who you are.
Yes, that's good. That's good stuff. Yeah, like being careful who you pour your life into, pour your time into, and who you're helping get a platform.
Correct.
What do you have coming up? You have any new work that you're working? You're doing.
So
right now?
I got some new stuff that just released on my SoundCloud. I like to use the arts. I like to use music to reach people. Specifically on my SoundCloud, it's not necessarily, when I say it's not necessarily, it's for the church. I think what I'm using my SoundCloud right now specifically is to reach the world. Mm-hmm. So a non-believer, if I meet a non-believer, I normally say, hey, go check out my SoundCloud, because I'll remix or I'll edit a song, or maybe even possibly a secular song that may have Christian connotations in it, right?
Yeah. And
I'll take that Christian connotation and then reflip it and use it, to honor God. And so my SoundCloud is for that. It's just kind of meeting people. I meet people all the time. I do both church events, I do corporate events, I do school events, I do all kinds of events. And so everywhere I go, I want to be able to just reach people, So my SoundCloud, I feel like, man, it's just for those who don't know God. You can go in there, you can find some amazing remixes. And when I say that, I'm not saying that if you're a Christian, you can't go and check it out. I think you can. And I think you enjoy a lot of the stuff that would be in there. But right now, we released a song with a friend of mine, Falu, and it's actually on our SoundCloud right now as a SoundCloud release. Okay. It's called Philosophy of Imagination, and it's actually a remix that I produced for him. And it's really a love song. It's a love ballad. Whether it be your girlfriend, whether it be your spouse, your wife, it's just a love ballad, man. And then you know, if you go into SoundCloud.com, you just type in Falu, which is FALU, or you can type in Philosophy of Imagination, or you can also type in DJ Overflow, and you can find it through the SoundCloud.
Awesome. So you got SoundCloud, where that sounds like all the fresh music is at. Where, how can people connect with you online? Do you have a website, Facebook, all that?
Yeah, my website is ChristFlowMusic.com. That's the website, ChristFlowMusic.com, and on there you can email me. You can, you know, if you're looking for a DJ, you can book me there. You know, you can find everything, who I am. You could, you know, you see pictures of my family on there. You'll see the remixes on there. You even see beats, man. I produce beats, and so some of the older beats are on there. You have access to that. So on ChristFlowMusic.com, you have access to my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook, all my SoundClouds, everything.
That's awesome, man. DJ Overflow, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today. I really appreciate it. It was a blessing to hear your testimony and everything God's doing with you and your family and your ministry. I know it's going to be a blessing to everyone else who is able to hear this. Again, just thank you, and hope we can have you on the show again later on to talk about future works you have coming up.
Perfect, man. No problem. Thank you guys for having me, man. And you know, you guys listen to this, and hopefully that, you know, you guys get encouraged by it, man. Thank you so much for having me on this show.
Wasn't that a great conversation? As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, this is the very first time I have ever spoken to DJ Overflow, and I'm so glad I had him on the show. I know this conversation is going to be a blessing to whoever is listening to it right now. Remember, as you walk through the valley, to look up, to look to God, choose Christ, choose life. As we heard in DJ Overflow's testimony, sometimes we don't know what God has in store for us, but it's our responsibility to walk faithfully, to walk with Him and towards Him, and go wherever it is He wants us to go. Sometimes we have dreams that we're pursuing, but we have to remember the best path to go down is the one that Christ has laid out for us. Will there be difficulties, challenges, and pain? Most likely. God never promises to get rid of those things on this side of life, but He does promise to give us peace and walk with us through those difficult times. If you want to find out more about DJ Overflow, go to his website, ChristFlowMusic.com. Check him out on Facebook, Instagram. You can find his music on SoundCloud and Spotify. The song you're listening to right now is called Garage Bag, and it is from the Kaleido Waves album that we talked about in the interview. That album can be found on Spotify. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to episode 7 of Radio Faith. If this podcast has been a blessing to you, then please share it with others. Leave us a comment or send us an email. We would love to hear from you and how God is using this podcast to bless you. Thank you, and God bless.